We are live.
Greetings,
Welcome,
greetings to
family.
everyone.
Welcome, family, to another show. Today we have a very special guest. I was on his show. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago. I was on
Yes,
your
sir.
show,
Yep,
and
about a
I
month ago.
watched you. I've been watching you, and you've been dropping so much good information. You are
I
a
appreciate it, man.
licensed clinical therapist,
hmm
correctly?
Yes, sir. A
Right.
licensed clinical therapist, bringing to you live from the greatest state in the union, the Tar Heel State. So
Oh, there you go.
you see me representing the blue, man. I got to represent. You
I
see
see
all
that
this.
blue out there.
You see all this blue, man. Blue also symbolizes masculinity. So
Hmm.
I rock the blue for two reasons: to represent masculinity, but also to represent the Tar Heels. So shout out to my heels, man.
Okay, cool. And introduce yourself. Your background, all that good stuff for us, brother.
Right, right. Yes, sir. Yes. So my name is, I go by the Kosher Clinician, also
Hmm.
Moses Stevens on Facebook, and
Hmm.
also Seven Smalls for anonymity reasons. But I am a licensed clinical therapist. My background is very diverse.
Hmm.
I first got my associate's degree in law enforcement back in 1996 because I've
Hmm.
always had a passion for the avocation of black men and black boys,
Hmm.
but all men, actually, not just black men and black boys, but because black men have always been, stigmatized and marginalized, and also Afro Latins as well. And
Hmm.
then I went back, Aaron, and got my bachelor's in social work from North Carolina Central University.
Hmm.
And then I taught school for about 5 years. I taught school for 5 years, but at that
Okay.
point, at that nexus point, Aaron, I realized that there were a lot of disparities with black boys or boys in general when a lot of
Hmm.
times we weren't building our boys at the same rate that we were building our girls.
Hmm.
And as a black man, I'm 6'5", 6'6". I experienced discrimination, and I said to myself, because I'm very, my personality is strong. I said at that point, it's incumbent upon me to start my become a therapist and to empower men and boys, especially black men and boys, Aaron, because there's a stigmatization about
Hmm.
the importance of mental health in the black community. And I think I'm one of the few and rare therapists in this corner, but also a black therapist from a red pill perspective that more or less promotes the empowerment of all men, but specifically black men, and the advocacy for men to do what's best for them, not being more or less influenced by a granocracy a lot of times that doesn't care about them, but they want them to serve them, but they don't want to serve the brothers. So I believe in
Hmm.
male empowerment for black men, but also all men. Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. And you also have a passport. You travel as well, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was with Al Grease. I'm going to be in the movie Frustrated 3. I'm going to
Oh,
be in the
nice.
movie Frustrated 3. Yes, sir. Me, Dr. Ron Neal, my man Chris Strongart, my man E. Spencer BMO. We were all down there back in May. I will be joining the crew next week. I will be flying out, so you and I can chop it up on the beach. And we're going to have a good show tonight, guys.
Hmm.
I plan to have Aaron up there and also Grease. And we're going to be talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And that basically means is that in order for men to become the best version of themselves, they have to be degreased. And so, Aaron, I use the word degrees synonymous to Al Grease because degrees is similar. Degrees is similar to a degreaser. When you think about a degreaser, you have to spray off the dirt that has been more or less impacted on the surface. Many
Hmm.
black men in America have been impacted by the mental surface of the stains of America, and they've been told
Hmm.
that they're not good enough, Aaron, to get the outcomes that they deserve. They have been designed and more or less socialized to be subjugates of the modern American woman, particularly black women, and they
Hmm.
don't know what their power is. So it's my job to empower our men by degreasing, because Al Grease
Hmm.
is degreasing people. You are degreasing people with black men's travel. And as a black clinical therapist, I'm trying to degrease men by modifying those negative thoughts that have been impacting them in a way that they're not getting the outcomes that they want. So it's time to be degreased, American men. It's time to love yourself because your time on this earth is limited.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Give me Okay, so I have a somewhat of a two-part question for you,
Yes,
brother.
sir. Uh-huh.
I want to start at the very beginning at the black male's development,
hmm
young black boys.
hmm
What problems do you see in black boys in their early development by not having fathers in the home?
Well, what happens when black boys don't have fathers in the home? They have a low image of what masculinity is. Human
Hmm.
beings, Aaron, are malleable. Malleable means to be molded, when you're malleable, you can be molded. Just like iron and ore and gold. When you can make something malleable, it can blend. But when you have a negative imprint, because when I taught school, Aaron, there were not a lot of black men in school. And so boys by nature are like herd animals. They got to have like a master or an alpha animal to be led. They did a study with elephants, Aaron, back in the past. And in that study, Aaron, though they had wild bull elephants and they didn't have any elder elephants. Those elephants went astray because they didn't have any older bulls. But when they put the bulls in place, the bulls gave the boys balance, structure, and order. And so black boys and boys in general need to have the image of a man in place to help them become the best versions of themselves. Men give guidance and instruction to young boys. And they also teach them how not to be emotional, because manhood, Aaron, is a series of hills and valleys, victories and failures. Manhood is not a destination. It's not a journey, but it's a destination, And so manhood is a cycle of events that men must go through. It's a cycle of events. So when boys are devoid of having masculine principles, and when boys are devoid of having men in their life, it can cause what's called a fragmentation of the mind. When a man's mind is in unison, then his mind is not fragmented. But many of our boys, Aaron, minds are fragmented because they don't know what true masculinity look like. And because of that, they tend to defer power. That's why you have so many simps. You have a lot of simps because they defer power. And so, Aaron, there were two types of simps that I talked about. One is called the conscious simp and the unconscious simp, right? And so the unconscious simp, he doesn't know any better. It stands for supplementing irrational male patterns. And I use the word male because men, when you know better, you do better. But a lot of times our boys and men have been conditioned to supplement their power to narcissistic behavior. And so a lot of modern women have what's called narcissistic traits. They're not bona fide narcissists, but they do have narcissistic traits. And so it's a terminology that we use in the clinical world called a narcissistic supply. So you're supplying that woman through a feedback loop, but you're not getting anything in return, which in essence diminishes your glow and your shine as a man. So it's important for men to stand firm in their convictions as men. It's important for men to understand what thinking errors they have as it relates to dealing with the modern woman. Once men can understand what those thinking errors are, they become better versions of themselves. And the way you become a better version of yourself is learn to come up with keen standards. You have to come up with standards, and those standards come through the fortification of brothers and the brotherhood. And so the second one, Aaron, is called the conscious simp. The conscious simp is a man that knows better because his internal hard drive says, I know I shouldn't be doing it, but he does it anyway. So I say, woe be unto the conscious simp, because he should know better. And the conscious simp stands for sacrificing important masculine principles. When a man sacrifices important masculine principles, Aaron, in the audience, it makes the woman lose respect for him. Women only respect power and strength. That's all they respect. They only respect power and strength. And when you defer your power, you're not getting power. You're actually losing power.
Okay. Now, wait a minute. So as far as simping, it has no financial means behind it? Will guys just spending money on women?
Right. Simping can be tied into the financial world as well if that man is not getting the outcomes that he wants. If he's just giving women money without demanding anything in return, then that's a form of simping. If he's giving his time without demanding anything in return, that's a form of simping. But also, believe it or not, guys, women get some out of sex too. If a man's sex game is good, she's benefiting from having sex with that man. And that can be seen as a form of simping because you're giving her your body. Now, I know some say, well, that's what I want to do. Well, that's true. But at the same time,
right,
you're still giving some away in return that's benefiting her. Women only respect power and strength. And when men realize the power that they have through movements like Black Males Travels and, movies like Frustrated and, and the Kosher Clinician, they become better versions of themselves. Men, you have more power than what you realize, but you have to modify your thought processes because you have been conditioned to see yourself as less. That's why, Aaron, when men travel abroad, they act like idiots because they're not used to women. And the main thing, Aaron, just be yourself. Just be yourself, and everything else will take care of itself.
Okay, now the second part of my question is, what are the effects of women not growing up with a father in the home?
I think the effects of women not growing up as with fathers in the home, Aaron, it's like it becomes contraindicated, right? So contraindicated means you would think they will want to look up to a man, but they actually look down on a man. So when you're not used to masculine power and authority, it teaches them to minimize the importance of a man. There's two concepts, Aaron, in my mind that has more or less permeated in this culture called the minimization of the man and the magnification of the woman. So when a woman is not used to order, structure, and seeing a masculine man in the home, she tends to minimize, Aaron, the importance of masculinity. And because of that, Aaron, what happens a lot of times, she don't see the man as anything to be reverenced or respected because she's never seen it. And so that's another form of negative socialization.
Well, that explains a lot. That
Right.
definitely explains a lot. And do you think that, seeking therapy will help us kind of in our relationships, better our relationships, if you identify the problems between, the man and the woman, saying, hey, you didn't have a father in the home, you might be dealing with these issues because of this. Do you think that helps in your experiences?
Oh, yes, sir. It definitely helps. But the issue with a lot of our women, Aaron, is that they have a hard time taking constructive criticism. Most therapists, Aaron, in this space are what's called it's a pink collar profession. So you don't have a lot of men, but also you don't have a lot of masculine men in therapy. And so a lot of times, because women by nature tend to be more nurturing, they don't tell them what they need to hear. They tell them what they want to hear a lot of times. And what it does not more or less reduce the pathology that they're having. But what it does, Aaron, it more or less arrests their development as a woman. Some women stop developing when they were 18, and they don't develop again until they don't have a man in the home, because now they got to fend for themselves. The beauty has vanished. And so now they really have to mature because they don't have the support of men giving them attention. So a woman having therapy, if she's willing to do the shallow work or do the work, Aaron, what it does, it helps her to see herself and all the thinking errors, because a lot of times in the clinical space, there's a such thing called thinking errors that impacts men and women to the point that they can have what's called self-sabotage.
Now, do you think that men should date women without fathers?
I think it's risky. I think it's risky unless they're willing to go to therapy and see the importance of following the man's program, but also the importance of a masculinity in our society, in our community. Sadly, masculinity have been minimized in our community, Aaron, to the point that many don't value it. You have the old saying, tired trope, I'm a strong and independent woman and I don't need a man. And that's a thinking error. It's called minimization, because the proper automatic thought that a woman should have. So there's a such thing called a schema, right? A schema is a fixated way of thinking. And then when you put in a situation, you have what's called an automatic thought. But what a woman should be saying is that I'm going to be soft and self-sufficient until I get a man. Independent and self-sufficient actually mean the same thing. But they should be saying I'm going to be soft and self-sufficient until I get a man, so that we can be interdependent. Because no man was made to be independent, nor woman. Men and women are better when they're synchronized to be optimized. Women are better when they're in synchronicity with their man, and that's where they reach what's called their full optimization. But sadly, they don't have that because many don't see the importance of having a masculine man in the home. And that's why many need to go to therapy and go through therapy to get the outcomes that they need, because sadly, a lot of our women are not only suffering in silence, but they're becoming victims of their own ignorance, in my opinion.
Okay, excellent. Now, you spoke on this on your previous show about Western men not being able to, I guess, speak their minds. What differences do you see between the West and countries like Brazil and South America and Asia as far as the relationships between men and women?
Well, listen, what I saw when I went to Brazil is that, men say what they mean what they say. They don't, they don't cover their words. They are unapologetically masculine. I don't think women have as many safeguards. They don't have the government in Brazil to come to their aid when they need help. They have more machismo in Brazil, in my opinion. And so if women disrespect their men to get out of line, there's a consequence. there's not a consequence, in my opinion, in America. The disrespect that some of my men get, and look, I'm not advocating violence. In some countries, they will be dead. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're correct. You're correct.
Because I believe in Colombia, they have something called femicide, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
It does. Here as well.
Here as well, right. So masculinity is respected because there's a consequence. That's behavior modification. But there's no consequence for a lot of the bad behaviors that we have with some of our women, unfortunately. And like I said, again, I'm not for violence, but I am for respect.
Fellas, I just put the Coach Clinic's channel in the description, so make sure you follow his channel. He drops a lot of good information. And this is a clinical psychologist that can kind of really dissect a lot of problems that we have within our communities, man.
Yes, sir.
You're doing the God's work right now. We really
appreciate it, brother. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you, brother, for having me. Thank you, sir.
Now, what made you want to get into being a clinical psychologist?
Well, I became a clinical therapist because I, too, went through pain. In the clinical world, Aaron, we call it sublimation. Sublimation is a healthy ego defense mechanism that's used to change the outcomes of the current situation that you're dealing with. Aaron, a lot of times when men are going through problems and issues and pain, they turn to alcoholism, they turn to violence, they turn to many negative vices that can be detrimental to their psyche. But I decided to use a concept, which is a healthy ego defense mechanism called sublimation. Sublimation a lot of times is tied to sexual impulses, but also it can be tied to just taking something negative and turning it into something good. And I realized that in this space, there was we talk about money, we can talk about game, we can talk about travel, we can talk about all those things, but we don't talk about the mind because it all starts first with the mind. The gospel even said, whatever a man think, that's what he is. So it all starts with the mind. So I took it upon myself to use this channel as a place for men to express their issues, but also to deal with the negative pathologies that they have more or less accumulated over time due to negative socialization. And a lot of the faulty teachings that they have been more or less experiencing here in America. So I did this as a way to, deal with some of the pain I went through because I saw the world for what it was back in 2006, where I knew women could lie, but I grew up in the church, grew up very conservative. And so when you see women for what it is, right, when you see women for what it is, Aaron, it destroys you mentally. Because, we've been conditioned in our mind to see women as innocent and virtuous, but, they're not.
Oh, man. I got a real good question. Since we both grew up in the church, because I want you to be really honest with this answer. Why are women in the church so damn dysfunctional?
Well, I think they're so damn dysfunctional, Aaron, because I think, right. I think they're dysfunctional, Aaron, in my mind, because I feel like a lot of times that the preachers don't hold them accountable. I think sometimes the preachers are ignorant to the power of the gospel. And then also I think they're dysfunctional because, they don't amplify the gospel. The Bible is very red pill. It's a very powerful book if you apply it correctly. But I think they're dysfunctional because many times they use the church as a safe haven to cover some of their past. You look at a lot of church women, many of them were former, they were former, 304s, a lot of them. And so I'm not against a woman getting redemption, but it's a lot of dysfunction because a lot of times people they can use Jesus to wash away their dysfunction. And then a lot of times the pastors and the preachers, in my opinion, they just do just enough to make the women feel comfortable instead of preaching the objective truth of the gospel, in my opinion.
Okay. Excellent answer. And also, when did you first start traveling?
Yeah. Actually, Aaron, I had my passport for like 4 years, man. Never had used it. I said, man, this passport's sitting in the closet. I need to use it. And so my first trip was when I went with the crew. I saw Al Grease was back in May. That was my first trip ever flying. I'm going out of the country. I was going to Africa at one point, but it was my first trip.
And can you explain to us, like, why is it so therapeutic for men to travel outside of America?
Right. So I said, Aaron, that there are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become an optimized male, and world travel is one of them. Once a man, in the clinical world, we use something called imagery. And so when you see yourself within the contextual framework of the United States in a negative image, when you get outside of that environment, because environment plays a role on the psyche of a person, then you have a whole new image. And so not only are you seen as an American, not a black man, but you also validated by women, because Al Grease talked about it when, in America it's very stressful. But when you leave the confines of America, you get in an environment where, the sun, the food is clean, and then you're around, very attractive people. And so that attraction helps lower your stress level. Mm-hmm. And so travel is important because it gives men validation. It gives them credence to their greatness. I saw on one of your shows, you talked about how black men are celebrated abroad. And black men, like you said, that skin, the brother I was listening to, that chocolate skin is celebrated abroad. Black men in general are celebrated because black men are very egalitarian. We tend to tolerate more because we've been raised many times by single women in single home environments. But in other countries, men are taught to stand on masculine authority and also masculine principles. So what it does, it recalibrates the mind and it lets them know, wow, I'm really validated, because many times, Aaron, men don't get the validation that they deserve, in my opinion, in America.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And why is that? Why don't we get the validation? You think it's an institutional problem more so? That the reason that I'm not going to say the end of the black family, but why the black family has so many issues? You think it's an institutional problem?
Well, listen, I think it's been an ongoing struggle, probably pre-antebellum, also post-antebellum slavery. Mm-hmm. I've always also heard guys say that some of our women always thought the white man's ice water was colder. Mm-hmm. But also because some of our women have probably always lusted after the beauty and the status of a white woman. And so there was a time when our women were taught that, masculinity and respecting your father is important. But now, unfortunately, because of the feminist movement, in my opinion, it has derailed the mental faculties of so many women to the point they think that the black man is their enemy. And Aaron and I know that the black man has never been the enemy of the black woman. We were both mules of the same burden. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, Aaron, a lot of times they just don't value heteronormative masculinity. They don't value it because they don't see it as important. As a clinical therapist, there's a such thing called there's an assessment that we use called the locus. And so it talks about the environment. And so if the environment is stable, then the mind is stable. But if the environment is chaotic, then the mind can become chaotic. There are some people that are to overcome that chaotic nature, do something called resilience. But everybody is not resilient. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not used to seeing healthy socialization, then how can you respect something you've never seen?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good point. Now, I want to ask you this. In Brazil, first thing I noticed was all the Afro-Brazilians, not all, but most of them, the majority of Afro-Brazilians are rocking their naturals. They're rocking their natural hair, which is just such the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Can you explain to this the difference between women wearing their natural hair and women wearing European style hair?
Yeah, I think when a woman rocks her natural hair, it more or less resonates with the masculinity because that's her true state of being feminine. Mm-hmm. So most black men like women that are naturally natural because it resonates their femininity. Listen, if you had a fake beard, Aaron, if I had a fake toupee, most women won't like that because it doesn't resonate, what she's looking for in a man because already in her mind, she knows something is off. But our men have been so conditioned, Aaron, to deal with that foolishness that when they see women rocking their natural, it's a turn on. It's very sexy to see women in their natural hair. I think it's very natural and sexy. Actually, in the 70s, they did it. Sisters had the natural afros. But somehow we've gotten away from that. And we tend to celebrate cultural norms that a lot of times are not applicable for a lot of our men. And a lot of times, Aaron, they're not wearing weave for black men. They're wearing for themselves and competing with other black women. They don't. That's
why I want. Okay, that's why I want to ask you. Right. So, does it have anything to do with what they say this European standard of beauty? The fact that we don't control the media and project, more Afrocentric or natural hair women? Is it something to do with the media, the influence of the media?
Yeah, I think the media has played a role on it, Aaron, but also I think part of it, I think it's the media has played a role on it, Aaron, but also I think it's part of it, it's a low self-image. I think a lot of black women suffer internally from low self-esteem, and that self-loathing behavior because they've seen the white woman as being better, they tend to internalize that because it doesn't make any sense to me to wear hair it doesn't look like your natural work. So we've been conditioned to think kinky hair or or thick hair is something negative. And I love kinky hair. I love what I call black cotton. I want to run my hands through some black cotton. I don't like all that weave and all that goofy stuff. My wife is natural. She's been natural for the last 4 years. She got locks. And so I like natural hair because there's a lot, it's better in my opinion. I like it a lot. And I think most men like natural women. But somehow our women have been conditioned to think that, that weave and those, snuffleupagus eyelashes and those raptor claws is what men want. And we don't want that goofy mess because it's not real. It's fake.
So I want to go back a little bit as far as the confidence of the black male and the black female. I believe it was the 40s and 50s, or maybe up to the 60s, a little bit of the early 70s, that black men had what they call conks. Malcolm X mentioned it in his book, right? And those were when we permed our hair to look more European.
Right.
Now, after the 70s, 80s, we started to grow more naturals, and then it seemed like black women kind of went back to that era of wearing Euro style hairstyles, but black men kept it natural. Is there a difference in the confidence level or
Well, it's ironic you talked about that, Aaron, because I was actually thinking about it. I think black men and black women both had low self-esteem, and they were trying to more or less perpetuate Eurocentric standards. But I think around the 90s, where you had the Little Kims, and because there was such low regard for black men and what black men wanted, they continued to perpetuate the blonde. And so also because, women are seen as beauty icons, men are not. Most cosmetic companies are not trying to push beauty standards onto men, because most men, we're just men, but they're pushing onto women. And so, Aaron, when you have damn near 7% of your kids born in single parent homes, who's there to validate their daughter and tell her she's pretty? Who's there to tell her she don't have to do all of that? You're a pretty baby, just like you are. Girls get their validation from their fathers. But when you don't have your fathers in the homes coupled with social normative standards, then a lot of times it's a recipe for disaster, because they tend to internalize that oppression or internalize that low self-image, and they tend to project it because secretly they want to be like the women, that are white, in my opinion.
Okay. Now I want to talk about black male. I want to focus on the black man for right now.
Right.
I want to talk about black male anger and frustration in the matrix, in some ways that we can kind of get through it. We know about travel and everything, but for the guys that maybe can't afford to travel right now, they in a bad situation. They can't, they don't behind on their child support. They might not like their 9 to 5. What are some ways that they can kind of vent, so to say, some of their frustrations and anger without committing some type of violence or something like that?
Well, that's one of the reasons why, Aaron, I have these spaces. I call these spaces something called a group catharsis, right? And so a group catharsis is a way for men to share their pain without internalizing negative behavior. So a group catharsis is a way for men to come together and to process their pain. I've had many men come to me in private and say, man, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your channel. It's really helped me out a lot. So I think what you're doing, what I'm doing, having these channels that tend to be male focused, but also black male focused, is what I call a cyber barbershop. It gives men the option to speak out without feeling shamed. And and I know, Aaron, unfortunately, there's been some females that have infiltrated these spaces, and they're not genuine. Some are genuine, they just want to learn, but some have infiltrated to change the message and to change the narrative. And so my channel, The Kosher Clinician, is unapologetically masculine. My channel is to inspire men, to teach men what they need to do to become the best version of themselves, and to let them know that there are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become optimized. The first real one is understanding female psychology. Once you understand female psychology, everything else will take care of itself.
That's a very good point. That's an excellent point. Now, we covered the anger and frustration. What about the anger and frustration coming from the women? They're dating. I call it broken sexual selection, where when they're in their early 20s, they start having sex with guys that might be in the streets or a little dusty or whatnot. Right. And then they learn, but then they want guys like us later on to help them raise the seed of these men.
Right. Well, what they realize is that the sexual market value begins to dissipate as they get older. Women are beauty icons. That's why it's more important that women get married in their younger years if they want to get the best outcomes. But Aaron, you know, and I know that many women by nature is something in Briefalt's law called hypergamous, you know? And so I talk about two conditions of hypergamy. One is called kosher hypergamy. Kosher hypergamy is something that your grandmother, your great-great-grandmother used. It's proper and fit, meaning I just want a man to love me, provide, protect. All women want that. That's proper and fit. I said yesterday, in fair exchange, there is no robbery in fair exchange. But most modern women, Aaron, have been conditioned to think they're better than what they actually are. And that's called carnal hypergamy because it's exploitative. They can get an Aaron Farris, and Aaron's a good man. He might make $65,000 to $70,000 a year. But if Aaron loses his job, then they'll try to swing over to the next man. And what they're realizing is that men now are saying they don't give a damn. You know, they don't care because many of them have been damaged by having so much sex. And so they become frustrated because what used to be a virtue icon, which was their sex, is so used up now. You know, men don't see it as a virtue anymore. They're so overstimulated by pornography and other different things. What's a vagina? Once you've seen one, you've seen them all. So what used to be something hidden and precious now is so relevant that the price of a vagina is actually gone down because it's so abundant in the marketplace. So women become angry and frustrated because they realize they wasted their time giving away their virtue when they should have been focused on the most important thing, which is family. And so they get frustrated because they don't have the same bargaining power that they had in the past. And Aaron, you know, and I know it gets better for men as we get older. I think I'm a lot better looking now. I thought I was good looking in my 20s, but, you know, I'm more refined now. You know, men age like fine wine. Women tend to age like sour milk. And so we tend to be we tend to become more refined. In general, there are some women that look good for their age, but you know what I'm talking about in general. And I'm not saying that all older men look well as good, but I'm 50. I think I look damn good for 50. You know, I think I look good for 50. So if men take care of themselves and eat healthy, eat clean, drink plenty of water, and focus on themselves, and they can get the outcomes that they desire.
Excellent. Now you touched on a big point real quick. Is there a difference between men having, you know, casual sex and women having casual sex?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think biologically, it does not impact men and women the same. Now, if you want to look at through the tenets of theology, ideally, everyone should come into a relationship being pure. That's ideal, but we don't live in an ideal world. When women, in my opinion, give their bodies away, there's a science, some call it pseudoscience, called microchimerism. And basically what it means, just say if that woman is allowing that man to emit his seed inside of her, she absorbs the DNA of a man. So say if a woman has been with 20 men and she's using an IUD, it becomes detrimental to her psychology as a woman. And so, and I know, Aaron, that, what sex can do, having a lot of sex with a lot of women can do for a lot of men is make them very impulsive and very neurotic. But normally it doesn't impact the man mentally to the point that it's doing severe mental damage. Now, somebody could argue it's doing damage because it's making them hypersexual, but I don't think it causes the emotional damage that it causes to women, because women by nature are insular. They receive. Men are the emitters. We tend to emit. We give out. And so, it damages a woman mentally, because I think a lot of times when it comes down to her getting in a relationship, it makes it harder for her to bond. Every time a woman gives her body away to a different man, just say if that man give her an orgasm, she's going to try to go back and get that first experience. So it becomes something called oxytocin abuse. She's beginning to abuse the oxytocin to get that hit, almost like a drug addict. It's called like a dopamine rush. And so she's trying to get that same fix. And so by the time she gets into a marriage, what good is she? Because, now, Aaron, think about it. If you get with a woman that she used to guys having 9 to 10-inch penises, and say you got a nice size penis, what the hell can you do with that? Right. So she been ran through, that's what she's used to. And so now you got to compete with the demons of her past. But on the flip side, Aaron, if you used to women with big butts and whatever, if you're used to sex, you're not going to say, oh, well, I got to make sure I get a big butt to get that same feeling, because a woman might not have a huge behind, but her vagina feels similar to the one that had a huge behind. Then you might, you're probably more prone to stay with her and not think about cheating, in my opinion. So I think it damages them psychologically, because I don't think women are designed to just give their bodies to multiple men. Most women that are hypersexual are victims of abuse.
Now, so what you're talking about is pair bonding, correct? When women have sex with too many guys?
Yes, sir. Pair bonding, right. So women produce oxytocin when they're breastfeeding, But also, Aaron, they produce oxytocin when they're having sex. And so it's a feel-good hormone. You know, it makes them feel good. And so it's almost like it's join and then tear away. So imagine a woman joined with a man, and every man she joined with gave her an orgasm. And then it pulls away. That's damaging a woman's psyche. If you notice in sex, Aaron, if you give a woman an orgasm, she wants to cuddle. But most men, they ready to go. Or they want to roll over because they lost testosterone. It's called vasopressin. So most men, they ain't thinking about color. I mean, I would color because I'm just very lovable. But most guys, after they have an orgasm, they roll over or they ready to leave because now they realize like Coach Greg Adams said, it's called post-nut clarity. They realize that they didn't want the woman. Damn, what did I do? Until his semen, until his balls fill back up with semen, and then he's back on the hunt again. But they bond because sex makes women bond and cleave to a man. And that's why once a man have sex with a woman, a lot of times it can mess her up mentally and reduce her ability to see that man for what he really is. It can hurt men and women, but a lot of times it tends to hurt, in my opinion, women more because sex tends to blind a woman from, like Raekwon the Man. And a lot of times, a lot of our women are so used to the Raekwons and the Man-Mans of the world, when they get a decent guy or average guy, Aaron, they don't know how to treat that man because her body has been conditioned to a certain type of man. Or she just use that man as a resource or utility to take care of her and the children she had out of wedlock.
Excellent, man. Let me catch the super chats, and I got another good question for you.
Yes, sir.
Shout out to my guy, Xavier Lancaster. Shout out to you, brother. Shout out to Snuggle668 for the 5 super chat. I really appreciate that. He says, compliments because of the clinician and the content that is being disseminated. Keep up the good work, young people, and for your hard work. Appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Now, I got to ask you this before we're going to go ahead and end up the show. The Will Smith, Jada Pinkett situation. I'm sure you heard about it. I think you did.
Yes, sir, I have.
You did a little show about it, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, Will Smith, super alpha male, multi-million dollars in the bank. Why do you think Jada seems like she just likes to go out in public and disrespect him?
Because I believe that Will Smith is like many American men. They defer power because they give it away. He's what I call an unconscious simp. I think Jada Pinkett, like many model women, have what's called narcissistic traits. And so he continues to defer power. He should have got rid of Jada Smith, Pinkett Smith, a long time ago because, he's a powerful man. He got money. He's not a bad-looking man for to be in his 50s, early 50s. And so the reason why she doesn't respect him because I think, one, she was imprinted by a more dominant man. I call it the thug imprint. I think she was imprinted she was imprinted by Tupac. And so this saved Tupac as somebody that, that made her have orgasms. And then also, I think Jada Pinkett is broken. Will Smith is the opposite of a Tupac. Tupac is broken, was broken. Will Smith was whole. And so I think a lot of times with Jada Pinkett, she's used to a certain type of man because see, the more women have sex with certain types of men, that's the imprint. That's what they're called for. Like I'm 6'5". So if a woman is used to a man that's 6'5", and dominant and powerful, every man that had a bald head and is 6'5" and he had some good sex, that's what she's gonna look for. She'll tolerate an average guy, because she's hypergamous. But at the same time, she's not going to respect a man that's an average guy because women are what I call sponges. When a man emits semen inside of a woman, that semen, all that doesn't go out, it absorbs into her bloodstream. So as men are the emitters of light, women are the receivers. And so that's why God never designed it for women to be, sexually promiscuous, men and women, but more so on women because they become molded. So Jada Pinkett probably was molded. Tupac's spirit is still inside of her. And guys, when you start dating some of these women, you're dealing with the spirits of many men, not one, but multiple men. And that's why it's so hard for some of these women to submit to you and your authority as a man because they have been conditioned with so many different types of men and different types of spirits. So you're fighting different personalities, which in essence can drive you crazy. And which in essence make the man lose power because he's constantly trying to compliment. Men by nature are doers and fixers. So a lot of times instead of men setting standards, they keep trying to fix the problem by putting Band-Aids over it, which in essence defers power instead of giving that man power. So he should have left her a long time ago because, her blatant level of disrespect is appalling in my opinion. it's appalling in my opinion, Aaron.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you travel like to South America and these other foreign countries, you see it's a pretty big, sizable single mother rate as well. What's the difference between these women here being, in some regards, better for a relationship, even though they might have a child or two, versus the single mothers in the States?
Well, listen, I heard guys saying that even the foreign whore is better than the modern American woman. And I think basically it's because they live in patriarchal cultures where the women are expected to respect masculinity. They're used to masculinity. And many times they've been conditioned to serve their men. So they might be working girls, but they still have been conditioned to be feminine. They've been socialized to be feminine because they don't have all the proper, they don't have all the safety mechanisms like women have here in America to go against the status quo. Men there demand respect. They demand that women live up to a certain expectation. But over here, our women don't see femininity as important. They see cooking for a man and serving a man as being a slave. Like I heard you talk about your girlfriend in Colombia. And when you went to wash the dishes, she said, no, we don't do that here. So the women in those countries have been taught to continue to more or less reflect on traditional norms, such as cooking and catering to a man, because they realize that the beauty density is so strong. If they don't, then they might be by themselves. But here in America, you got chicks that are 600 pounds that still think she deserves a top-tier man. You got, women like Lizzo that still think she deserves a top-tier man. But what is she giving that man in return? Nothing. Because most of them don't come in willing to serve. They come in expecting to be served. If that answers your question.
So it's role reversal. I think you had mentioned that as well.
Right. Yeah, it's role reversal. Because listen, when you live in a world, Aaron, where you don't see strong fathers, Fannie Lou Hamer talked about in the past, she said, I look forward to being by my man and standing by his side. But it almost seems like, Aaron, in my opinion, that, the civil rights movement, after the civil rights movement, we lost a lot of momentum. And now to the point, Aaron, now that our women have been so liberally indoctrinated that they don't respect the family structure. And many of them don't respect men because they've been indoctrinated by liberal feminist ideologies. They've been indoctrinated by feminism. And so because of that, they think that they are equal to men. And men and women are not equal. They're equal as human beings, but are not equal in role and design. And because women don't understand what their proper roles are, it's causing a lot of issues in relationships. That's why, Aaron, and I know when you travel abroad, women tend to be a lot more cerebral and a lot more copacetic. It's almost like two ships passing the night. The American male and the Latin woman. They understand that Latin men really don't care, because they got a multitude of women. But black men in America have been so conditioned to see themselves as less than, and they tend to give those women the love and the romance and the affection that they so crave. Because Latin men a lot of times are very indifferent. Whatever woman, I get 5 more, I got 5 more lined up. They don't trip. But black men have been going through affection deprivation for so long that if they get any attention for a woman, sometimes they overgive it. And they tend to simp out. But to the men that are used to women, if they measure the amount of love they give to a woman, they give it to a foreign woman, it tends to work. The relationship tends to work because American men have been conditioned, especially American black men, to give and love women and to treat them well. But a lot of times we do it to our own detriment here in America because it's not always reciprocated.
Very good point. And we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the show. I'm gonna tell about your YouTube channel.
Yes, sir.
What do we expect from your YouTube channel?
Well, so the Kosher Clinician is based on 7 core principles. And so the Kosher Clinician is about being raw and unfiltered. When you think about in Hebrew, the word kosher means to be unfiltered. Many times in these spaces, and I take a great risk doing what I'm doing because I am a licensed therapist, but, it's unfiltered. So my job is to empower men through the 7 core principles. In Hebrew, 7, or the skava, means to be complete. And so there are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become optimized. Female psychology, finances, faith, family, politics, world travel, male physical health, and male mental health. Once a man can master those 7 core principles, then they become the best versions of themselves. They become complete because in the Hebrew, the 7th day God rested because his mission was complete. My mission is to get men to become complete and to stop deferring their power on the Kosher Clinician. Once they become complete and understand how women work, they can understand the better necessity on how to leverage and on how to broker power instead of giving power. Frederick Douglass said it better than me, Aaron. He said that power never conceded to anything without a struggle. It never have and it never will. So I'm going to teach men that they don't have to concede their power. They have to remodify their thought processes in order to get the outcomes that they want. And once they become the best version of themselves, then they can start demanding what they want from a woman. And if she doesn't give it to them, then you go to an area in a country where women will give it to you. Because, Patrick Henry said it better than me. He said, give me liberty or give me death. And I think a lot of American men, Aaron, are getting sick of the malaise that we have here in America. And they want to get with women that are going to love them, honor them, and respect them as men, in my opinion.
That's real, man. That's real.
No doubt.
Well, once again, I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Right. I appreciate it, Aaron. And listen, I'll drop the link. Hopefully you can join the show tonight. I'm going to have Grease and Black Ram up there, man. Tell the crew to come drop through. We're going to have a powerful show talking about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And we're going to talk about that interview you had recently. It was a very good interview. And we're going to talk to men about why that's so important for them to become better versions of themselves. So thank you for the show, man. I love you, man. Thank you for having me on. I'll see you next week in Rio, Brazil. I'll see you next week, brother. So I look forward to the conversation.
All right, man. Love you too, man.
All
Peace.
Right, no doubt. Salute, King. All right, be good, brother.